Tonight, the final moments of Dr. Adnan al-Bursh, one of Gaza's most accomplished surgeons, who died in an Israeli prison. A witness says he had visible injuries in his last minutes. So what happened to him?
No water, no electricity. But we have a hero, surgeons.
We follow his story in the weeks, days and hours leading up to his death. As hospital after hospital is targeted, he sees the health infrastructure of Gaza crumble, and then he's detained by Israeli forces.
He was unable even to go to the toilet alone. So I thought he was beaten very badly.
As aid agencies warn of apocalyptic conditions in the north, Hamas say they are now ready for the violence to end.
Stop this war immediately. We are ready to go for a ceasefire deal.
Using satellite imagery, witness statements and personal testimony, we investigate Israel's military tactics in northern Gaza. Good evening. We begin the program with one doctor's story, Dr. Adnan al-Bursh, an orthopedic specialist, one of Gaza's best-trained surgeons. He spent the war tending to broken limbs and broken bodies in northern Gaza. Now, for the first time, we can bring you a comprehensive account of his final days from those who say they were there. Through his own words, recorded on video, on his phone, through the memories of his colleagues, his family and witnesses. And we reveal testimony from one man who says Dr. al-Bursh had clearly been assaulted and had injuries in the moments before his death in an Israeli prison. The IDF and the Israeli Prison Service have denied responsibility. Sky's international correspondent John Sparks has this special report.
Just about everybody in Gaza knew Dr. Adnan al-Bursh. The longtime surgeon was known and venerated for his empathy and warmth, while his surgical skills were honed by war.
This is the recovery room, full darkness, no water, no electricity. But we have a hero, surgeons in Gaza.
He was a lovely fellow. He was always smiling. He was very friendly. He was very outgoing, but he was aware of his responsibilities.
After Hamas launched its brutal assault 13 months ago, Israel unleashed its firepower to devastating effect. And as an orthopedic specialist, al-Bursh was in demand, dealing with broken limbs and broken bodies in northern Gaza, while recording the surroundings on his mobile phone. However, the Israelis said medical facilities were used by Hamas, and al-Bursh was detained by their forces last December. Friends and loved ones never saw him again. Hundreds of medical workers have died or disappeared in Gaza. But Sky News has tracked down people who knew Dr. al-Bursh, people who worked with him, who witnessed his treatment. An eminent surgeon who was subjected to repeated physical attacks. That is the claim.
He was so badly treated, so he was unable even to go to the toilet alone. So I thought he was beaten very badly.
This was Al-Shifa Hospital, the biggest medical facility in Gaza. Israel said Hamas used it as a command center. But the hospital was quickly overwhelmed in the weeks that followed the outbreak of war. Dr. al-Bursh found himself in the eye of the storm, saving lives in the operating room, sleeping in the staff room,
صعبة جدا، إيش يعني ظروف صعبة جدا إذا بتلاحظوا.
And compiling a record of the crisis on his phone.
طبعا لأبطال الشباب التمريض الحكماء يعني من أول يوم في الحرب موجودين.
This is the surgeon's friend, Dr. Obaid.
This is a party of bread. We don't have bread from 1 week, and today, inshallah, we will have some bread.
Conditions were deteriorating at the 700-bed facility, but the staff seemed overjoyed when they received ingredients for bread. Israel cut the electricity, and food, fuel, and basic medical provisions, like pain relief, were severely curtailed.
Surgery with chargeable light. With, unfortunately, sedation. We have no anesthesia. Sedation with manual ventilation. Look here.
The strain never far from the surface.
Sandin. رغم الألم صندي.
By mid-November, Al-Shifa had become part of the battlefield, Israeli troops encircling the facility after days of clashes outside. Bursh documents the mood inside. Here, a colleague recalls a painful conversation with his wife.
هذا الطلب كانت في طول حياتها، دائما بتطلب مني طلب واحد، بس خلينا أشوفك مبتسم. بعد هذا الحرب إذا الله سبحانه وتعالى أنجانا.
The wards were packed with patients, the corridors used by displaced residents seeking shelter from the war. Dead bodies were dumped outside and left on the hospital forecourt. The World Health Organization called it the death zone. Here we see staff members in scrubs digging mass graves. The head of orthopedics lending a hand. These images captured on his phone. A few days later, the hospital was evacuated. Patients and staff walking south in long columns past dead bodies left in the streets.
أخرجنا الجيش الاحتلال الإسرائيلي من مستشفى الشفاء عنوة وجبرا.
Videos on the surgeon's phone capture words of shock and surprise.
الحقيقة مظهر يشيب له الولدان. وهذا الدكتور عدنان معنا. الله المستعان. الله المستعان.
But Bursh didn't follow the road to southern Gaza. He retraced his steps, heading northeast. Another hospital, called the Indonesian, needed his help. He was greeted by mayhem and scenes of desperation inside. The following was recorded just after he arrived.
تفاجأت لحجم الكارثة في المستشفى الإندونيسي. تفاجأت بأن هناك جرحى ومصابين ينتظرون أكثر من 10 أيام لعملياتهم. الجروح تعفنت، التهابات شديدة في الجروح.
He was one of the best-trained surgeons in Gaza, completing an advanced course at London's King's College Hospital. The training was led by this man, Dr. Graham Groom, who says Bursh relished his time in Britain.
He was exposed to the techniques we use, and most importantly, to the team approach to the management of badly injured patients. He saw a much more coherent and cohesive team approach. And then he and others very much adopted that approach.
The fellowship didn't prepare him for this. On the 20th of November, Israeli tanks surrounded the Indonesian hospital. Later, projectiles were fired into the second floor. More than a dozen were killed, but Bursh survived, and we see him surveying the damage with his phone. The Israeli military said it responded to enemy forces, but no shells were fired.
دمار سيء للغاية.
A few days later, he ventured outside.
في كل مكان الدمار.
Israel and Hamas had agreed to a temporary truce, although the ceasefire would only last for 4 days. As the truce fell apart, Bursh moved on to a small, hard-pressed facility called Al-Alda, the only functional hospital left in northern Gaza. And these are the last images we have of Dr. Adnan al-Bursh. They were posted on the hospital's website 1 day before his arrest. The facility had been surrounded by the IDF, and the staff were under strain.
We are in a horrible situation. We have siege around us. The Israeli army is around us, and our team is exhausted.
These the words of Dr. Mohammed Obaid, colleague of Dr. al-Bursh. The two men were frightened. They knew, as doctors, they'd be accused of supporting or working for Hamas.
وكان الخوف شديدا ليس فقط من الشهادة، فالشهادة أنت شهيد عند الله تعالى، ولكن كان الخوف من التنكيل أو التعذيب أو الاقتياد إلى سجون ولا تعرف ما هي مصيره.
Eventually, the hospital director told them they had to leave.
فقال لنا أن قوات الاحتلال لديها كشف كامل بجميع أسماء الذكور ما بين 14 سنة و65 سنة في مستشفى العودة، ولقد قالوا له حرفيا إذا لم يأتي جميع الرجال الموجودون في الداخل فسيقوموا بتدمير مستشفى العودة وما فيه. أخبروها أنهم سيقوموا بقتل الجميع.
They threatened to destroy the hospital with the women and children inside, he said eventually. We put this allegation to the Israel Defense Forces, but it didn't respond. These drone images were taken near Al-Alda Hospital in December, and they match the location and description of events provided by Dr. Obaid. After their interrogation, Obaid says 5 medical workers, including al-Bursh, were taken away.
وكانت لحظات صعبة جدا عندما نظر إلي الدكتور عدنان أحسست أنه يشعر أو لديه إحساس أنه في مأزق شديد وأخذه ضابط الاحتلال وكانت المعاملة خشنة جدا.
Dr. al-Bursh was sent to an army base in Israel called Stade Teman, a now notorious center used for processing detainees from Gaza. They're bound and blindfolded for long periods, and allegations of physical, mental, and sexual abuse are rife. It's thought many of the inmates are medical professionals.
In the camp where I was, there were about 100 prisoners. I think at least a quarter of them were involved in healthcare. A quarter? Yes, at least. Okay. Some of them are doctors and nurses and technicians.
We found Dr. Khalid Hamouda in Cairo, a refuge, he said, after spending 3 weeks at Stade Teman. He told us the guards used him as their helper and remembers being told to fetch Dr. al-Bursh at the gate.
And at this moment, he told me that they beat him badly. He feels pain in different parts of his body, in his chest bone and his back and his legs. He told me that they keep beating him till he arrived where I met him.
At the detention center?
Yes, in the detention center. He told me that he thought he may have broken ribs.
How did he look the next morning? How did he appear?
He was so badly treated, so he was unable even to go to the toilet alone. So I thought he was beaten very badly.
Al-Bursh left Stade Teman on the 20th of December and entered the Israeli prison system. In April, he was taken to a facility near Jerusalem called Ofer, where he died shortly after his arrival. News of the surgeon's death was announced quietly in May, the Israelis offering no explanation, no cause of death, nor have they returned the body to members of the family. Here's what we do know. The regime at Ofer is harsh, a point emphasized by the prison service when this Israeli television crew were taken for a tour. They're all murderers, all terrorists, said the deputy commander, although many of these prisoners haven't been charged. Sky News can reveal new information about al-Bursh's death. Human rights lawyer Nadia Daka has obtained a deposition from a prisoner who says he witnessed the moments leading up to the doctor's death.
He had clearly been assaulted with injuries around his body. He was naked in the lower part of his body. The prison guard threw him in the middle of the yard and left him there.
The deposition says al-Bursh was taken by an inmate to one of the cells.
A few minutes later, prisoners were heard screaming from the room they went into, declaring Dr. Adnan al-Bursh have been martyred. Adnan al-Bursh was not the first case of a person who was beaten and died in the prisons since this war. Before him were many and many cases.
The Israel Defense Forces told Sky News that the death of Dr. al-Bursh was not its responsibility. The Israel Prison Service has also denied responsibility for the death of the doctor. In a statement, it said, all basic rights required are fully applied by professionally trained prison guards. We are not aware of the claims you described, and as far as we know, no such events have occurred under IPS responsibility.
Some people might say, some people will say, that Dr. Adnan al-Bursh was a terrorist.
Like, if I want to answer formally to this question, he was not charged till now, and many of these detainees are not charged from Gaza.
Dr. al-Bursh leaves his wife, Yasmin, along with 6 children. They've been displaced by the war and currently live in the remnants of a school in central Gaza. The doctor's pictures now adorn the wall, and they've got his old phone messages, but that won't bring him back.
أنا نفسي بأقرب وقت يجيني وأدفنه وأكرم مثواه، بس برضو خايفة من هاي اللحظة إني أشوفه بعد ما كنت أشوفه عايش وله هيبه وإنه كان كبير وقد حاله بالأخير أشوفه مستشهد قدامي.
Dr. Mohammed Obeid was detained by the Israeli military 3 weeks ago, along with several other medical staff. Doctors Without Borders says it is extremely alarmed and is trying to determine his status and location. This story is one of a countless number that have been buried under the immovable weight of Gaza's recent past. Yet al-Bursh was a much-loved figure in Gaza. His death and the manner in which he died deemed by many as unforgivable.
Live for us now outside the South London hospital where Dr. al-Bursh trained. Excellent, brilliant investigation there, John. And we know that Dr. al-Bursh trained and travelled from hospital to hospital to provide support and care to patients. And we're now learning a little bit more about how he died.
That's right, yeah. Look, I've been in touch with the team of instructors here at King's College Hospital in South London, and they told me that they were glad that his story had been brought to a wider audience, that it hasn't been forgotten, that the allegations of mistreatment have been recognised and acknowledged. That is meaningful for them. They also told me that they were happy that the images that al-Bursh took on his phone have been broadcast as well. The Israelis said that Al-Shifa Hospital was one of the main control and command centres for Hamas, but you don't get that impression from al-Bursh's videos, do you? That does not come across. I think he had an eye for the remarkable amidst the everyday. You know, the people making breakfast in the staff room, a group of doctors on their very first day, just after the conflict had began. Also concern expressed for Dr. Mohammed Obeid, friend and colleague of al-Bursh. He was detained on October 26. His employers, MSF, Doctors Without Borders, they don't know where he is, they don't know how he is. The concern expressed to me is that he could find himself in a similar situation to Dr. al-Bursh. The IDF and the IPS, the Israeli the Israeli Prison Service, they say that they are not responsible for the death of Dr. al-Bursh.
John, thank you so much for all of your reporting. Well, as Israel has intensified its military offensive in the north, the UN's acting aid chief has described conditions there as apocalyptic. And today, the independent monitoring group Human Rights Watch said that what's happening out of sight of the world's media amounts to war crimes. The Israeli military told Sky News it is committed to international law and operates accordingly, that it is committed to mitigating harm to civilians and works in various ways to evacuate civilians prior to attacks. Our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire has been looking at the evidence.
Israel denies independent media access into Gaza, so the full extent of the military's operation is difficult to quantify. But the view from above can give us indications. The satellite imagery taken in just the last few days shows what has been happening. We're talking about this area in northern Gaza. Now, first, we're going to rewind to the 29th of September. This is before Israel intensified its ground offensive in the area. And we're going to pay attention to these areas in yellow and in orange. Yellow will show areas that have been cleared. Orange will show damaged or destroyed buildings. And this image was taken on the 12th of November. As large areas to the west of the Jabalia refugee camp have been cleared, as dozens of buildings can be seen either partially or fully destroyed here in those orange boxes. Now, based on similar sorts of open source analysis, Human Rights Watch has published a new report. And on the destruction, it says that the forced displacement is widespread, systematic and intentional, and amounts to a crime against humanity. Now, we put that allegation to the Israel Defense Forces along with our own analysis, and they told us there is no IDF doctrine that aims to cause maximal damage to civilian infrastructure, regardless of military necessity. IDF actions are based on military necessity and in accordance with international law. We can also use satellite imagery to see how land is being cleared on the east of the Strip. This shows existing corridors here, and we're going to talk about new activity up in the north. Now, again, let's go back to the 27th of September, see what things were like before. Here we are. Here is the perimeter of Gaza. And we go to the 12th of November, this latest imagery, we can see what's happening. You can see here these yellow arrows point to new pathways, and this orange area is an area that has been cleared. Now, why is that significant? Well, it could offer a potential access corridor across the territory. And the UK's ambassador to the UN, Barbara Woodward, has raised concerns about what is happening, telling the Security Council that northern Gaza must not be cut off from the south. According to Human Rights Watch, that indicates that at least in the buffer zones, there is security corridors in Gaza. The Israeli authorities are pursuing a policy of ethnic cleansing. And the Israel Defense Forces told us again, the IDF is fully committed to respecting all applicable international legal obligations, including the law of armed conflict. Considerations and obligations with respect to proportionality and military advantage are evaluated and applied on a case-by-case basis. At the same time, northern Gaza has seen mass evacuations. The Israeli military has faced criticism over the orders given to civilians and also the lack of provisions in the Al-Mawasi humanitarian zone in the south. In a 5-day period in October, our analysis found that Israel evacuated 90% of North Gaza. And this is what those evacuation orders look like. And note that none of these say when the order was issued, how long it will last, when it will expire, and thus when civilians might return home. Now, Human Rights Watch has criticised this, saying that Israel has not, however, secured the safety of displaced Palestinians in Gaza in any meaningful way. It has instead created an evacuation system that has caused widespread terror and confusion, misery and anxiety. And the IDF said that since the beginning of the war, the IDF has been working in various ways to evacuate the civilian population in proximity to the combat zone prior to attacks, making significant efforts to mitigate harm to civilians. Every civilian in Gaza can stay informed at any given moment about designated humanitarian areas and how to reach them. The IDF is committed to international law and operates accordingly. That is all the bird's eye view, satellite imagery from space. People in Gaza are living and dying in the reality on the ground.
Senior Tom Cheshire with that report, and we can show you now that harsh reality of life in northern Gaza. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle has this report.
The airstrikes come without warning. For some, It's enough. Time to leave again. The constant move to the promise of safety, which doesn't exist. They mostly walk in silence. Women and children watched by Israeli tanks and struggling under the weight of whatever belongings they can carry. Some can barely face it. They've lost the energy to keep fleeing a war that has no front line. In the panic to escape, these children have lost their mother. A sleeping baby has also been separated from her family.
This girl was with her grandmother, an elderly lady. Her grandmother dropped her. We don't know who she is. All we know is how to help each other. So we are waiting here in hopes that her parents will come and take her.
This is the safe zone they have been sent to. The airstrike on Wednesday morning left a huge crater. It is no wonder that so many don't feel like this is a better alternative to life in the north.
We don't know where we have to go. Seriously, there is no safe place to go to. No safe place, so we don't know. Seriously, we have nothing. We lose everything we have.
There are thought to be as many as 75,000 people still in northern Gaza. They are surrounded. Israel's military says Hamas is regrouping here and has ordered everyone to leave. Another airstrike breaks the brief silence. Very little aid is getting into the north. The World Food Programme has warned that the area is on the brink of starvation. But Israel says that Hamas and other gangs are stealing food, water and fuel to sell at inflated prices.
My plan...
Juria Island was head of Israel's National Security Council. He has proposed a military strategy for Gaza called the General's Plan, which would lay siege to the entire north of the Strip and starve Hamas into surrender.
We encircled all northern part of Gaza 11 months ago. And because all this area is encircled by the Israeli forces, the best way to move forward is to conquer this land.
The plan has been seen by senior military commanders and Netanyahu's office. The IDF denies it is carrying it out, but many analysts say there is evidence to the contrary.
What we should have done to tell all the remaining 400,000 civilians that they should leave this area. Even the competence of Hamas, everyone should leave. But after 2 weeks, I will stop the supply of food, fuel, and other, let's say, important material. And this is the most effective way to conquer the northern part of Gaza without killing civilians, because all those civilians, by that time, will be out of this area.
And if they can't leave? Or if they don't want to leave?
I'm saying I will not begin the siege before I see what is happening with the civilians.
And what if Hamas will leave? Then what do you achieve?
Now I have a real leverage that might force you to release the Israeli hostages. Because if you don't do it, I will not evacuate this area.
We have verified this video of an Israeli drone strike near the coast. The people watching, believed to be soldiers, laugh as one of them sings the final countdown. Israel denies that there are plans to reoccupy Gaza, but bulldozers are destroying what few buildings are left standing. Northern Gaza is steadily being emptied, and any memory of life here eradicated.
And Alistair joins us live now. And Ali, I mean, for more than a month now, aid agencies have been extremely worried about the situation in northern Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, the pictures, the testimony that you heard in my report there is the sort of thing that we hear and that we see from Gaza pretty much every single day and have done for months and months. People who have been displaced from one area to another area and then to more areas as the fighting evolves around Gaza. People saying that they don't have access to food, they don't have access to water, medicine, etc. I was on a briefing with the Israeli military earlier this evening. They deny the accusations that they are not allowing aid in. They say at one crossing, the Kerem Shalom crossing, there is so much aid piled up on the Gaza side of the border that they almost can't get any more aid in there, and that it's the fault of the aid organisations. They say they have paved roads in Gaza to ensure that aid can get around Gaza more quickly. They've opened up a new crossing, which is quite close to the humanitarian zone. But the United Nations, and this is echoed by many other aid organisations, the United Nations have said that in November, so for the duration of this month, every single attempt to try and get aid or medical supplies into northern Gaza has either been impeded or obstructed.
Ali, thank you so much. Well, data released by the Israeli government illustrate a sharp fall in the delivery of aid in the last month. Let's just have a look. This graph shows that the vast majority of aid enters Gaza across land borders. In September, that was shy of 88,000 tonnes. But if you look from October here, there's been a massive drop-off in aid getting to the Strip, down to less than 34,000 tonnes. 21,000 tonnes has gone across the border so far in November. The Director General of the World Health Organization describes the situation in Gaza as hell and told me he believes Israel holds the key to ending the war.
I think the word apocalyptic can describe it. And said it before also. It's maybe for people who say, or define hell, it's hell. And the situation is worsening, and it's not improving from day to day. And maybe coming back to the level of destruction, imagine more than 43,000 dead. And 2/3 of those dying are women and children. And that's why from WHO side we always say, the wrong people are dying, and this figure, the 2/3 death is women and children, that alone should be enough to stop the war.
And yet it's not stopping the war. When we're seeing both sides not coming to some kind of agreement, and the world's powers, the United States, is not able to bring them to a negotiating table, and that's why a year on, we've seen health workers targeted, and we've seen the death toll reach the levels that it has.
I think I have said it many times, the key is in the hands of Israel. It should choose peace. To be honest, I also care for Israel and the Palestinians. Peace is in the best interest of Israel itself.
That was the Director General of the World Health Organization there. So what impact could Donald Trump's return to the White House have on this region and talks over a ceasefire? A senior Hamas official has a message for the incoming president. Dr. Bassem Naim told me the group is ready to do a deal and end this war, but he claimed Benjamin Netanyahu isn't interested in negotiations. Well, 101 of the roughly 250 people taken hostage on October the 7th remain in Hamas custody, while some have been killed, rescued by IDF forces, or returned home in an exchange. Many are still unaccounted for. Hamas expressed no regrets for the attacks, despite the destruction caused on that day and ever since. Have a listen to our conversation. We're 13 months into this conflict, and more than 43,000 Palestinians have been killed, 100,000 injured or missing. We've seen Gaza completely flattened. Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of the political office here, killed. Yahya Sinwar killed. Would you say that what happened a year ago on October the 7th was a massive disaster for Hamas, for the Palestinian people, given that this is the outcome?
I think you can see this only in one case. If the Palestinians were living in their own state, independent state, free,
but it wasn't like this.
In a dignified life. But you have to remember that the Palestinians are suffering an occupation for 76 years, that between 2000 and 2023, 20,000 Palestinians killed, that Gazans were suffering of a suffocating siege for more than 17 years. I mean, the Israelis were declaring publicly their plans to annex the West Bank, to Judaize Jerusalem, to expel the Palestinians.
Do you think, though?
I mean, October 7th was simply an act of defense, because what we have seen on a daily basis, what the Israelis planning is to expel the Palestinians and to deny their right to exist.
Dr. Naim, I want to ask you about the change in government in the United States. We're seeing the Biden administration depart, and we're seeing President Donald Trump, who's now president-elect. What message do you have to him, and are you worried that he's going to take an even more hardline approach to the situation with the Palestinians?
Look, first of all, which president the American elect, this is their decision. This is not our business who is the president of the United States of America. But our message is clear. We are people who are looking for a better future. We are looking to secure a dignified, prosperous future for our children. Therefore, we are calling any president, including Donald Trump and his administration, to take the needed steps to stop this aggression, to stop this war immediately. We are ready to go for a ceasefire deal.
Dr. Naim, thank you so much for your time.
Please.
Well, I've also been speaking to Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, about the lack of aid reaching Gaza and our investigation into the death of Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh. I just want to get your reaction. If you don't know the full details of this particular case, a doctor who was much respected and beloved in Gaza died in an Israeli prison. Your reaction to that?
Well, as I told you, I will not get into speculation. I will look at the document you published, and I can respond to that later on. But I will tell you that we arrest terrorists. We don't arrest innocent doctors like you pretend to present now. And unfortunately, what we found in Gaza, that you had also doctors, lawyers, UN workers, UNRWA employees, that they had a day job with the hospital or the UN agency, and they had a night job with Hamas. So I don't know the details. I cannot tell you that this guy you mentioned is a terrorist or not. I will look into that. But when we arrest someone, we have the information, we have the intelligence. And unfortunately, we saw also doctors who were torturing hostages, who took part in the massacre. We saw, unfortunately, thousands of people who were collaborating with Hamas.
With the greatest respect, and I know that you're saying that you haven't looked at this particular case, but as an ambassador to Israel and a case that is widely known and human rights lawyers have looked into and investigated his case, the fact that you don't really think this is important enough to look into, that in itself is alarming, is it not, Ambassador Danon? I know that you will say to me that you're currently prosecuting a war and dealing with this situation, but this is a man who documented his time inside the hospital. His work was documented and known to many, many people, and he did end up dying in an Israeli prison. And so did you not think it was worth your time to look into this?
With all due respect, if it was really important to you, you could have sent me the information and asked me to look at it before the interview. But no one told us that you want to speak about this.
We did 4 hours ago.
No, that's not
Ambassador,
correct.
we sent you the details 4 hours ago.
That is not correct, and we haven't received any information about that. And you know, we are speaking with you many times, and I will continue to speak with you. But I'm dealing with hundreds of issues. And you know what I care more? I care more about the hostages who are now in Gaza, the 101 hostages. That's where I put my time, to see why they're still in captivity and what can I do to bring them back home to Israel. We didn't choose this war, and we are still in Gaza because we have those hostages in the hands of Hamas. So if you ask me about my priorities, is to take care of the hostages first.
I just want to draw your attention to a Human Rights Watch report which has accused Israel of committing crimes against humanity in northern Gaza. The interim chief of the UN's humanitarian body said Israel was committing acts reminiscent of the gravest international crimes, and aid groups collectively said you were failing to allow sufficient aid into Gaza. Do you reject all of the reports and claims being made by all of these different bodies who have been investigating for the last year?
You know, you make it sound so honest and true, but all those organizations you mentioned, have you heard them condemning what happened to us on October 7th? I'll give you an example. Yesterday at the UN...
Of course, and Human Rights Watch equally condemned... I just want to clarify, because I spoke to... Absolutely, but I just want to clarify with you, Ambassador, because you're saying that these organizations haven't condemned Hamas. The UN Secretary General has condemned Hamas. This Human Rights Watch report condemned Hamas. I interviewed Hamas today, and I put these claims by Human Rights Watch to Hamas. I told them that they had been accused of human rights violations as well as crimes against humanity.
Yalda, I'm here at the UN. I can tell you that the UN never passed a resolution condemning Hamas, not in the Security Council, not in the General Assembly. They passed numerous resolutions condemning Israel, and we see those bias reports every day for different organizations. Yesterday, I brought to the UN the mother of a hostage, Ayelet Samerano, whose son was kidnapped by UNRWA employee. And we asked the commissioner of UNRWA, Mr. Lazzarini, why they pay the terrorists, why he signed the paychecks for terrorists for years. And I think those are the questions we have to explore. Why those NGOs actually collaborated with Hamas. So with all due respect to all of those organizations, you know, we feel that they are one-sided. Not all of them. Some of them are actually focusing on humanitarian efforts. But you have those who care more about bashing Israel rather than supporting the Palestinians in Gaza.
That was Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon. Well, let's bring in our US correspondent, Mark Stone, who joins me now from the White House. And Mark, we were hearing there from a member of Hamas who says they are committed to reaching some kind of ceasefire deal. You heard there from Ambassador Danny Danon, who said they are committed to international law. I guess the question is, what hope is there that some kind of breakthrough can be achieved with the new Trump administration?
Well, I think between now and when he is inaugurated on the 20th of January, I think little hope. But beyond there, I think let's start with the positives. Donald Trump is a man who likes to be seen to win. He is a man who likes to be seen to get a deal. And so I think he is also, it's worth stressing, a man who is close to Benjamin Netanyahu, who has spoken to him on the phone, who has had his closest aide to Mar-a-Lago this past week, Ron Dermer. So the positives are that Netanyahu and Trump talk. They get on in a way that Netanyahu and Biden have not. So the prospects perhaps of a ceasefire, of some stop in the fighting over the course of the next few months are maybe a little higher than they have been so far over the past year. That said, have a look at the sort of people Donald Trump is surrounding himself with in his new administration. Take, for example, Mike Huckabee, who will be, if confirmed, the US ambassador to Israel, the former governor of Arkansas. He is ardently pro-Israel. He is a man who says the West Bank doesn't exist, that the Jewish settlements in the West Bank are not settlements, they are cities, they are not illegal, they are perfectly entitled to be there. And he says that if Palestinians want their own state, well, then they should move elsewhere. So I think you can see the contours of what peace in the Middle East might look like under a Trump presidency. It may be peace. It may be peace for Israel and for the Palestinians. But what does it mean long term? Donald Trump likes short-term gains. He doesn't necessarily think strategically long term. And so I think the prospects for the Palestinians under a Trump presidency are bleak.
Mark, thank you. Well, it's helpful now to pause and consider what we've heard this evening. We heard about the forced displacement of tens of thousands of people, described by Human Rights Watch as widespread, systematic and intentional. Israel says it's committed to international law and preventing civilians from harm. Sky News analysis has found that 90% of the north of Gaza governorate was evacuated in 5 days in October. Israel denies it has a policy of partitioning the north. Food security experts say there is a strong likelihood of imminent famine there. Israel says that's partly because Hamas and other gangs are stealing food to resell. And we heard about the witness statement that renowned surgeon Adnan al-Bursh was assaulted and had clear injuries minutes before his death. His final moments were spent in an Israeli prison. Both the Israeli prison service and the Israeli government have denied responsibility. His family are yet to receive his body. Well, we may never know exactly what happened to Dr. al-Bursh or the hundreds of health workers who have died or disappeared. And every day, aid agencies say conditions in northern Gaza are getting worse. Thanks for watching and good night.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent.
It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century.
I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight.
We help you understand the world with us.
A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life.
They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming.
Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama.
Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record.
Sky News, the full story first.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Welcome back to The World. I'm Barbara Serra. Let's go to the United States now. And in the last few minutes, the incoming president, Donald Trump, has appointed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to his cabinet as Health and Human Services Secretary. Mr. Kennedy unsuccessfully stood as a presidential candidate earlier this year, but has more recently become one of Donald Trump's most prominent backers. Well, let's cross now to our U.S. correspondent, James Matthews, who joins me from Washington, D.C. James, we've seen Donald Trump make some pretty controversial appointments over the past few days, but this one perhaps more controversial than most.
Hi, Barbara. Yeah, a shocking pick, as shocking, but probably more so, as you say, than the last one. It will shock the population at large, certainly the political world and public health sector in this country. RFK is a prominent anti-vaxxer, and he's an individual who pushed conspiracy theories about a number of health-related topics. He has done in the past. He is, of course, RFK Jr. from the Kennedy dynasty, son of Bobby Kennedy, nephew of JFK. He ran, as you said, in this election early on as an independent before pulling out, and he threw his weight behind Donald Trump. This announcement clearly is the kickback. He was on stage with Trump at his victory event. Then Donald Trump said, I'm going to let him go wild on health. So, yeah, a controversial appointment, to say the least. The role puts him in charge, a role overseeing the agencies that touch on almost all aspects of health, medicine and food in the United States, basically oversees the treatment that people receive. And he does that without any medical training. He is an environmental lawyer, a well-known conspiracy theorist, resistant to many aspects of established public health policy. In the past, he's claimed that HIV doesn't cause AIDS. He is an anti-vaxxer, has referred to vaccines as unproven and dangerous. At one stage, made a link between vaccines and autism. So, you know, what lies ahead is confrontation, to say the least, between the man in charge of health and the medical practitioners who operate underneath him, according to established practice. So plenty of scope for professional tension. But of course, we are talking about medicine, treatment in this country, literally a matter of life and death. It is the latest Trump pick, of course, that rips up the script in terms of who does what and what their qualifications should be. Critics here are talking in the most strident terms about unqualified, unserious people being touted for very serious jobs. RFK and the others named in the past couple of days, Gates, Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, they have to be confirmed by the Senate, of course. So we'll see how that goes. But Donald Trump quite happy. He's tweeted in the past hour talking about RFK Jr., saying that for too long Americans have been crushed by the industrial food complex and drug companies who've engaged, he says, in deception, misinformation and disinformation when it comes to public health. Donald Trump quite happy with his appointment today. I can tell you many are not.
James Matthews with the latest there from Washington, D.C. James, thank you. There's heavy police presence in Paris tonight around the Nations League football match between France and Israel. Let's go to our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, who joins us from Paris. Adam, all eyes on Paris after the violence that we saw in Amsterdam last week. What is the situation like in the French capital now?
Pretty calm is the truth. The game between France and Israel has just finished. It finished in a 0-0 stalemate, a largely uneventful game. Couple of scuffles inside the stadium during the match, but those were snuffed out rather quickly and hard to tell, frankly, whether those were instigated by French supporters, whether it was the Israeli supporters, of whom there were very few in the stadium, maybe 100, perhaps 150, in a game that was played in an extremely strange atmosphere. By far the lowest attendance for a home game that the French men's national team have ever had to face, outside, of course, of those COVID restrictions. But I think that for the French nation, this wasn't so much about the game of football. It was about stopping any great disasters, any of those violent conflicts that we saw in Amsterdam. And how did they do that? Well, here's the clue. Just look over here. You're going to see an enormous police presence, which we have seen over Paris throughout the day today. Got mounted police here. This is the CRS, the very well-known French riot police. And if you look down the road, you see a long, long line of police vans. We could take you down the other side and you'd be seeing the same thing, water cannon parked up there. None of this has really had to be put into effect because I think the deterrent has probably had an impact as well. Now, these people who are leaving the game now are heading off in that direction. Down there is Saint-Denis. There was a big demonstration earlier there today, a pro-Palestinian demonstration. It was supposed to be much nearer to the Stade de France. At the last minute, it was pushed much further away, maybe a couple of kilometres away. And when those demonstrators, those protesters, tried to get up to the stadium, there was a police block in front of them. The Israeli supporters were brought in coaches, guided in by the police. Dignitaries also brought in under heavy security. The French government always said they weren't going to cancel this game despite protests, but they said that it would go ahead with the highest level of security. Yes. That is what has happened, and so far it seems to have passed off peacefully.
Adam Parsons in Paris. Adam, thank you. You're watching Sky News. Coming up, Yalda Hakim will be back live in Doha with more on our Gaza investigation into the death of a famous surgeon in an Israeli prison.
Conflict. They keep telling us that they want aid. And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle. Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.